If you guys haven't heard by now, yeah, this is the Nick Frazier Podcast, and you're getting the best genuine content out there. Right, fellas?
Agreed.
BK, welcome to the Nick Frazier Podcast. Appreciate you hopping on, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm sorry I put you off a couple times, but
you're a busy man.
I am here.
Yeah, you're a busy man. You had the NFL drafted at 10-2. Cam Ward, how about that?
Exciting start for a franchise that needs an exciting start. Hope he lives up to the big expectations that are going around town.
Do you think it's kind of almost like hitting the reset button from like the early stages of when the Titans came to Nashville?
Well, I mean, they've had a chance to do that a couple times. So Vince Young was hitting a reset button. Marcus Mariota was hitting a reset button. Jake Locker was hitting a reset button, and none of those were very successful. So for the team's sake, I hope this one goes better than those three did.
Well, we're not hitting the reset button on this episode, but we're going to hit the rewind button. Go back into your career, how you got started in the industry, and just kind of maybe give some pointers for some of those people out there that are trying to get their foot in the door. So kind of starting out with you in Oakland, because was that one of your first assignments / professional big boy jobs after you graduated from college?
Yeah, that was my first break in covering pro sports full time.
Yeah.
The 95 Oakland Raiders, who were just going back to Oakland from Los Angeles. So they actually trained in El Segundo, which is where the Los Angeles airport is, and commuted to home games in Oakland. So all the papers, and there were a lot of papers still at that time, flew somebody down and covered the team Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Friday. Mm-hmm. Then they would go home and then go to a road game or whatever. I covered them at home, so to speak, and commuted to every game, be it home or away.
Really?
So it was a tiring season, but a lot of fun.
So when you kind of got your feet wet in that industry for the first, I guess, season or so, give or take, do you remember your first story?
I don't remember what my first story was there, interestingly enough. I had a really tough boss, and I was not near him, so I wasn't seeing him. I was just getting phone calls and phone messages,
right? And
I was getting wiped out pretty good with messages about how bad my work was.
Really?
So they trained shortly after I started. They were in Trinity University in Texas, I think, outside San Antonio, I want to say. Mm-hmm. And I'd gotten to be pretty fast friends with one of the other guys on the beat who knew I was getting beaten down, and we walked into the hotel together, and his room was down the hallway to the right, and my room was down the hallway to the left, and I got a message at the front desk to call him, and he said he watched me take that left and just like go really slowly down that hallway. My room was at the end of the hall, and I was going to call Dave Bergen to get chewed out to some degree, and he said he went down to his room and then just kind of watched how slowly I went to my room because I was stalling.
The walk of death, or walk of shame, however you look at it.
Wasn't pretty.
What publication was it?
The Oakland Tribune.
Okay, so that's a big name. You got a big job.
It was then. It was like a lot of papers heading towards its last legs.
Do you ever have like that starstruck effect when you got into the industry, especially like covering the Oakland Raiders?
Well, I mean, it's the best story I have in all of my time covering the league, my first meeting with Al Davis. And so it's that same trip at Trinity University. They had like 3 practice fields, but instead of being like stacked this way, they were stacked long ways. Mm-hmm. And so he was signing autographs down here, and I kind of waited him out until he signed some autographs, and I introduced myself with him, and he was in his white sweatshirt, and we were walking slowly towards the training center or the locker room where the players were going in, and I had prepped pretty well on Al Davis, but nonetheless, I was a kid and I was a little nervous, and I kind of was running out of stuff, and so we were kind of nearing the end, and I said, Mr. Davis, I'm a Northeasterner like you were when you came out to California. How do you suggest I adjust? And he kind of stopped. We were walking, side by side this way. And he stopped and turned to me sideways like this and put his hand on my shoulder. And he said, "You don't adjust, you dominate." like in this very Al Davis voice.
Yeah.
And this is a story that made his obituaries, at least in like the San Francisco Chronicle and maybe in the Chicago Tribune, where guys who were with me at that stage ended up writing his obituary. So that's probably the best NFL story I have. It's been all downhill since my second week on the job in 1995.
So I guess from that point, did you have that like inner feeling like, I now have to do this. I now have to have 20 plus years in this industry.
I never set out to be an NFL guy, to be honest with you. I want to be a newspaper reporter, and then I wanted to be a sports reporter. But that Dave Bergen, who I mentioned, the editor who was beating me down, I had a friend where I was working who was friends with him, and he promised her that he would hire me if the Raiders came back because he'd have another job in the sports department. But he didn't know how he would shuffle his staff or what I would get. So I just as easily could have wound up on the Sharks or the Warriors or the A's. It was fiscally most beneficial for him to put me on the Raiders.
Right.
And so, I mean, I liked the NFL plenty. I liked the NFL plenty then, but I landed in the NFL not because I was like hell-bent on getting in the NFL. I landed at the Oakland Tribune because I was hell-bent on going somewhere to get a job.
Yeah, just to get a job, make some money. Exactly. Now, I want to, before I get to jump into the Titans and the Oilers and their transition to Nashville, and for you, why Nashville, I just want to know one thing because I'm a big baseball fan, the Oakland Coliseum. Was it nice back there, or was it an absolute dumpster fire as it is today?
No, it was still a dumpster fire. But, I mean, they redid it for the Raiders to come back. So, however bad it was for baseball, it was way better for baseball before they built that, one-side bleacher that was ideal for football. So they really ruined it for baseball at that stage. I covered a couple A's games, which were, I'm pretty sure, the extent of my pro baseball reporting.
Yeah.
Major League Baseball reporting. But they made this stadium, horrible for baseball. And it was not, even as a redone stadium then in 1995, very good. And then, I just remember, and it's happened to several stadiums in my lifespan as an NFL reporter, stadiums closing or being imploded for new ones. But I think it hit me when that stadium finally, when the Raiders left and went to Las Vegas before it's now completely shut down for the A's, I'm really old that I've outlasted the stadium I started covering a team in. Now my first year on the Oilers, was the last year of the Astrodome, where there was a kitchen fire in one of the early weeks, and you smelled that remnants of that kitchen fire for the whole season.
How crazy is that?
Yeah. And that was a weird one, too. I remember my sister and my brother-in-law, I don't know if they were dating or married, but they went on some kind of cross-country trip, and they went through the Astrodome. I was a little kid because they brought me back an Astros hat.
Okay.
And I just thought it was really cool that they'd been to the Astrodome and brought me back an Astros hat. And I was still young enough, an Astros hat meant something to me. You know how I am about uniforms and stuff.
Yeah.
I would never touch anything that's not Yankees. Probably by the time I was 8 or 9, I was in that mode. So this was really early. But then, I got this Astros hat from my family traveling to buy the Astrodome as a tourist attraction. And then wasn't that many years later where I was covering the last season of the Oilers in the Astrodome. It was pretty cool.
So take me through that, because I want to get to the transitioning phase for your career when you went from Oakland, then to Houston, and then Nashville. My question was going to be why Nashville, but obviously the transition from Houston to Tennessee for the Titans' sake, Oilers' sake, that is. It just, what was that last season like for you as a reporter and a writer from Houston to Nashville?
Well, I was exhausted from the moving around because I was working in Washington. So I went from Washington to Los Angeles to Oakland to Houston to Nashville, and that was from 95, late summer of 95 to 4th of July 97.
Holy cow.
But I was going where the work was. So Tennessee hired me, having just done what they were looking for, which was somebody to cover the last season of the Oilers. make some connections, introduce the team to Nashville, and cover the legal wrangling that was going to go on for them to get out of their Astrodome lease, because that wasn't a done deal at that time, but everybody knew they weren't going to stay beyond that year. So that was interesting. I was up here a couple times, like the U.S. Figure Skating Championship was here between the end of the Oilers season and the legal wrangling period. So, like, I came to Nashville and stayed in a hotel and covered that for a while. I did a few things like that I can remember. But it was really smart on the Tennesseans' behalf. I mean, they got lucky also in that Floyd Reese and Jeff Fisher and Don McLaughlin and a lot of the executives that were prominent with the team were held over for a long, long time. So I had a year head start on relationships with people that other people only saw maybe on Sundays. And the Nashville Banner was still around then, but they didn't know those guys like I did, and the TV people didn't know those guys like I did, because I was at practices on a daily basis,
frequent basis,
compared to those guys. Maybe only seeing them at select games that they went to, depending on what their budget was, but they weren't spending nearly the money the Tennessean was in terms of having a full-time guy at every Oilers event.
So then once you got to Nashville, you're like, God, there's nothing here. Like, wow, why the hell am I in the middle of nowhere?
It was a lot smaller than it is now, that's for sure. But
do you see the advantages of it?
Well, yeah, it seemed like a nice place, and I didn't know that I'd be here, permanently.
Right.
At the rate I was moving around then, it could have been a year or two. I actually had an offer to go to the Palm Beach Post to cover the Dolphins at that point. And my parents, I don't remember being that close to taking it, but I remember my parents telling me, like, it's all right if you stay. Like, even if you think it's a better job or whatever, based on what you've done with all this moving and stuff, like, it's all right if you don't chase the next thing.
Did they ever tell you, like, hey,
which I didn't,
you could always take a breather and come live back with us type thing, or no? It was always.
There was no. I had my foot in the door and I was off and running. I didn't need to go back to Jersey for any reason, but I didn't need to go to Miami either. And so it was the right call to stay. And I was a fish out of water in terms of Nashville, but there was already a wave in '97 when I got here of people coming from out of town. And so I met Teresa, my wife, relatively quickly, fall of '98. John Glennon, covered that season for the Commercial Appeal. And between the three of us, Teresa had already found a bunch of Northeasterners, and Johnny and I found a bunch of Northeasterners. Not that we couldn't blend in to some degree with Southerners, but we also had a comfort level with other people who had moved here from outside. And so we were with people from Columbus, Ohio, and Boston, and John's from Northern Virginia, and my wife's from Philadelphia. And so it wasn't as we weren't just dropped in kind of. I didn't feel like I was dropped in on my own. Yeah, like there were a bunch of us that were kind of getting used to it together.
The best way to describe this is, once you got to Nashville, what was your number one thing you kind of always gravitated towards when it came to storylines? Because obviously, new team, new everything, you're always going to be grabbing that hottest thing out there. But for you, when it came to the Tennessee Oilers being in town, what was that number one story that you always gravitated towards?
Well, you never want to be kind of one track that way. You want to find a lot of things. But with any team, anytime you don't have something, you write the quarterback.
Yeah.
That's kind of
the
default thing. So it was McNair. But Eddie George, people kind of forget in history, because of Steve's sad passing and the way that team came to be remembered, they tend to make it more about Steve than about Eddie. It was Eddie's team.
Yeah.
And it just the way it was built, the way it was run, the guy who did more of was the face of the team. He was much more gregarious. Not that Steve wasn't perfectly capable of all of those things, but it was Eddie's team. So
build around
write
the run
quarterback
game
when you're in doubt, but you couldn't go wrong writing Eddie George at that stage.
Yeah, he's a former Heisman Trophy winner. Yeah. Run first mentality for sure.
And they were both good to deal with, and they knew that it wasn't a very popular team at the beginning. Certainly that that 96, 97, 98 build up to 99, the interest was really low, and those guys were chief marketing executives as well as the running back and a quarterback.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about, building a good rapport with a guy like Jeff Fisher, Floyd Reese, all the other higher up executives. For you, when it came to writing stories about certain players, how did you build that rapport with those guys?
It just really comes mostly from being around and being judged as trustworthy and fair. And even now, I know people, the business has changed a ton, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on that makes it more guarded. But still, I think a guy who knows you're going to be around all the time, that comes to know you're going to ask questions beyond the very predictable, boring thing, might have issue with the tone of your coverage to a degree. They're probably less familiar with your coverage than guys back then were who had a stack of everything that was written about the team in their locker every day if they wanted it. They might have that online now, in their email box if they want it from the team. But, it's still the same, being around, being conversational, being available to talk things out if and when there's an issue, those kind of things. I think you buy yourself credibility with that.
So when you ended up transitioning more into the Nashville market, covering this team for 4 or 5 years under your belt, then, the radio personality Paul Kuharsky kicked in. Give us a little background into that, when that transition began for you. Obviously, it was at 104.5, and you ended up getting that full trio of the Midday 180. A lot of good days for you back then.
It actually took a long time for me to get a presence on Nashville radio, which I think took a long time to kind of
was that always
catch up
a
to
thing for you?
A major league market. Yeah, well, it was a thing for me for a while. John McClain, God bless him, good friend of mine and a great radio personality, but he had outsized presence here, knowing all of those guys, and he still has great even untold stories about that era. But as things started to change and players got unfamiliar for him, I thought, hey, there's great space for John McClain, but there's also great space for people who now know the people who are in the locker room and the new people in the front office and on the coaching staff and stuff. And I thought the market was pretty slow to want people who knew that.
Right.
And once some of us started to get on the radio more, I think it really broadened the scope of a lot of fans and helped the team, to have more conversations out and about from people who were more in the know about people like that. But I started really on the wake-up zone. So, that's after Wycheck retires, and he was retired maybe for a year or two before Frank got that job with Mark and Kevin, and that was my I was doing radio, but a lot lesser quality stuff before that started. And then, I was a segment guest for a while, and then they said, hey, this is funny, let's do an hour. Why don't you come in for an hour? And then it was 2 mornings a week, and then it was 3 mornings a week, and then I was kind of in line for if we start another show, we've got
Paul on speed dial.
You in mind, you and Hutton will be the core of that, and then we collectively worked to decide that Chad was the third one, and we had phenomenal 9-year run.
Well, explain that 9-year run, because there are a lot of people, especially in the Nashville market, that I'm one of them, where I would be either in class or my mom would pick me up early from school, and I'm listening to the radio. I'm like, Paul Kuharsky, Chad Withrow, Jonathan Hutton, Midday 180. Like, it was a consistent, I guess, go-to on the radio dial.
Yeah, it was so much fun. I think we were really good. Chemistry was great. We all kind of blended in really well. None of us were afraid to be the butt of the joke. We mixed kind of our personal stuff with, I think, really good analysis, story of the day, real heavy on Titans and SEC football. Good guests and good interviews, and I think really when COVID hit, came up with some clever stuff that took off. Rhett Bryan of Titans Radio helped us out with some songs and some jingles and stuff like that really really helped differentiate us, I think, from a lot of people. And we got great ratings, and it was a great time. And it's kind of, I look back on those days very fondly. And I aired in my part of it coming apart, but it was bound to come apart. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of,
Like they say, all good things come to an end.
Yeah.
From time to time, rekindles in some regard. Everybody enjoys those good days. But being on the radio for you and finally having your big break when it came to Wake Up Zone and then Midday 180. I'm just curious from your perspective, did you ever have somebody that you kind of wanted to emulate their style, or like you pick and choose from other markets? Like for me, listening to the radio growing up as a kid, as a baseball guy, listening to Mike Shannon with the Cardinals radio, Jack Buck, like all those, because I always wanted to be play-by-play color analyst for baseball. Did you ever have anything like that for you?
I never really thought about it. I mean, when I was younger, I thought that, I'm a Tony Kornheiser fan. I don't see much of Tony Kornheiser anymore, and I was more a fan of reading him than watching him. And he might write a little bit still, but rarely. But no, as a radio guy, for me, it was easy at the beginning because it's an extension of what you're writing and seeing. And so I think any newspaper reporter should be good on the radio as a conversationalist. I think it'd be rare to find one that's not. And so it just kind of goes from there. And then you start to, have some laughs with the people you're on with and stuff like that, and it grows from there. But I wasn't ever really thinking about anybody else. I was just kind of being myself with the people that were nice enough to have me on, Mark and Kevin and Frank, and it just kind of took off from there. And being a reporter can be a little bit of a lonely endeavor, especially depending on your bosses. But a lot of times you're sitting in a press room and it's about you and the computer in front of you after you've done your reporting. And radio was a lot different than that, a lot about camaraderie. And so I think that added an element to my life that didn't exist before that, especially when you look back to 97, 98, 99, where there wasn't a lot going on. A lot of outlets have been created since then, and a lot of people, but there were a lot of empty press rooms.
4 or 5 people in a press box, stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of how Nashville SC is kind of right now. They're gradually, press box is getting more full, but when you mentioned about just it can be lonely from sometimes being in a press room and stuff like that. Have you, I guess, clicked for you to create more friends in the industry? Was it kind of hard for you in some regard, or not really? Because like for networking purposes and friendships and so forth.
Well, actually, it worked really well for me when I got the job at ESPN in I want to say 2007, 2008, 2009. I should know that year off the top of my head. But that network, which was initially just eight people, one covering each division, they had maybe 2 or 3 right out of the gate. John Clayton was big at helping formulate it. But then when they had 1 or 2 guys at the beginning, they kind of asked those guys, like, who should we be hiring from these other divisions? So Pat Yasinskis covered the Panthers. He was from Tampa Bay, covered the Bucks for a while, ended up going to Charlotte for his big break and covering the Panthers. Now, I knew Pat, like we were kind of kindred spirits, similar guys covering similar teams maybe. But I didn't know him really well. We just kind of had a mutual respect for each other's work.
Right.
And he really went to bat for me as the AFC South guy. So oftentimes when I'm talking to college kids who want career advice and stuff like that, I'll mention this story. Like, if I had to pick of all of the people I'd crossed paths with and all of the mentors that I had and all of that, who was going to be the person that really helped me land like the biggest break that I got along the way? And that was probably the biggest in terms of, that took me national for 9 years and raised my profile a great deal. I wouldn't have picked Pat Yasinskis, right?
Yeah.
So you never know who it's going to be, and then I helped push a couple other people, in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
And it was much more colleagues than it was bosses.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty interesting.
When you were at ESPN, kind of developing that, I guess, networking aspect and also writing for them, at the same time, were you thinking in the back of your head, like, maybe this might be a future endeavor for yourself?
Well, I think, the thing is, like, on your best days at ESPN, first there were 8 of us, and I think all 8 of it, they hired 8 ambitious people. They told us, limit your work to this amount, but none of us were going to limit our work to this amount. We all
Exceeded
over-delivered. And I think, on our best days, when we had a Sports Center hit and did well, all of us thought, well, I'm going to be the one of us that takes off. But all 8 of us were really good. So there are a couple guys that are still, maybe fewer and fewer from that original 8, but then it turned into 32, and out of those 32, there are a couple left, and some of them have higher profile jobs now. But it's just it's like working at the Pentagon. There's so many people there.
Yeah.
And you have to make friends with the right middle manager in order to get to be friends with the right upper manager. And then, do they want a bald guy for that job that's on TV? Probably not, and so it wasn't too long before I was jaded knowing that what my ceiling would be there, which was fine. But then, like with most of these places, and especially a big place like that, like all of the people that had hired me and really liked me were gone from that, and
Your
they have a
initial
whole
hiring,
new
yeah.
people in that want a whole new kind of thing. And something that's worked against me in at least 2 places is that I'm a part of what makes me good, at least as an opinionist, is that I'm a edgy, tell it like it is, don't hold back kind of guy. Well, that's who I am, right? So when it comes time to talk about my next contract or stuff like that, some of that personality that's gone on in office politics or stuff rub people the wrong way and put me in not great situations. And me saying, well, you like what I've done work-wise, right? And they say, yeah. And I say, well, that's why.
Yeah.
So, like, you're kind of canceling yourself out when you want me to, be 2 different people.
Right.
So you like that when the switch is on.
It's almost like
but you don't want it to be fake. So it's real when the switch is on. It's real when the switch is off, but you don't like it when the switch is off.
We're in 2 faces. That's the one thing. I mean, I've only been in this industry, sports radio, that is, for 3 years now, going on 3 years. It's just, to me, I can't be 2 faces. You just got to be organic. And that's what you are with your writing. You're organic, and you express that now in your current day and age for your career. You express your normal self, which is great. I think a lot of people should actually embrace that rather than try to, fake who you really aren't. You know what I mean?
And that's why at this stage of my career, having started an independent thing that's worked pretty well is probably exactly the right place for me to be.
This is a dumb question in a roundabout way. Obviously you see this thing going a pretty far distance, meaning a long time. You can keep this, website going. My question is, how do you keep getting ahead of the curve? Because obviously technology changes. Is to your website, is there going to be some form of like a Paul Kuharsky TV? I mean, obviously you do all the stuff with 440 and so forth, but like, is there something else you're going to do like on a weekly basis? Or,
I don't know.
2-3 weeks a day?
I'd like to
that?
come up with something new and cutting edge, but that's not really what it's about. It's about the niche that I have of Titans fans who want my brand of analysis that I think is very distinct from what everybody else collectively and individually brings, which includes institutional knowledge that we're talking about going back to the very beginning, and includes relationships with people that other people don't have relationships with that help me get news that other people aren't getting, and gives me a depth of knowledge out of my experience and those relationships with people who have been here and people who have been here before and people around the league to present things in a way that other people can't.
We get to the number one thing that I wanted to get to in your whole entire career is your relationship with Frank Wycheck. You've talked about already with the aspect of starting out as a writer, eventually getting to know personnel and getting to know players along with the Tennessee Oilers and Titans and so forth, getting your job over with 104.5 in the radio realm of things, starting out at the Wake Up Zone after Frank retired. How did that relationship kindle? Was it from when he was in his playing days, or was it after the transition with radio?
Well, we were about the same age in the locker room, so it's different, I think, for a reporter during that time when you're roughly the same age as the guys you're covering, as opposed to now that I'm probably could be dad for some of these guys, which is a completely different relationship, right? But we were both Northeastern guys. He's from Philly, I'm from Jersey, not too far away. Had some common sensibilities about that. And he just kind of got what I did for a living. He was a candid guy. I really liked the way he talked about, some stuff. Like when he made a play, he said he would go back to the huddle happy that he didn't screw up. If he made a play, it meant that he didn't screw up. And his whole objective was just not to screw up, to not disappoint McNair or George or Bruce Matthews or his coaches. And that kind of struck a chord, not just with me, but with everybody. He's also the kind of guy that, like, if you were in the locker room, he didn't see you as invasive. He saw you as like another guy to BS with and have a good time talking about with stuff. Or that, like, if they're having a conversation about politics, back when you could talk about politics or the stock market or whatever, he'd say, let's see what Kuharsky thinks, or let's see what, whoever was there would pull over and talk to. So never in a locker room have I sought to make friends. It was easier back at the beginning and when they were good to be friendly with guys. So, when people ask me who my favorite guys to cover have been, Samari Roll and Frank Wycheck are at the top of the list. Well, they were part of a very good team. They were very productive players, and they were not shy about, on the occasions that they played poorly or the team played poorly, about being part of what was held to account for it. I think those are rarer and rarer packages now. Then he's out of the league, and on the radio, and we have some very real conversations. Like, people are calling in and saying Frank should be a Hall of Famer, and I'm saying no, he shouldn't. And he's like, this sucks that I'm in the middle of this because I never said I was a Hall of Famer, but here you are kind of bashing me saying I'm not a Hall of Famer, and it's kind of a very real conversation, And I think people took to that, and we got closer through that. But I was going somewhere else. Oh, I lent them $100 at the Pro Bowl because they had signed helmets. Pro Bowl is just, the locker room back then was lined with helmets for everybody to sign. Mm-hmm. And I think those guys, either he was 100 short or the helmets were only $100, which would be a hell of a discount. And then I forgot about it, and he forgot about it. It came up like 3 years later, and he didn't remember anything about it, of course, conveniently. So he had this long-running thing about the $100 he owed me for this helmet. But also, I remember I did a story. I went to 2 Pro Bowls in a row, I think in January of 2000 and January of 2001. And I got him, he was playing golf with Rich Gannon and somebody else. I don't remember who. And I rode on their cart and wrote about their day of golf. Jay Glazer was there. He was still at the New York Post. He was still just a beat guy. And he was like telling me, that's so lame. Like, you should be playing golf with them. And at that stage, and I would still say, like, I don't want to play golf with them. Well, first off, my golf game's not good enough. But, like, to me, it was more a story about, like, I did stories sometimes. Like, I caught punts from Brett Kern when I was still young enough, and I kicked field goals with, can't remember which kicker, and for ESPN, I did it with Josh Scobie in Jacksonville. But at that stage, I was still, 3-4 years into covering Oilers, Titans. I wasn't at a place to insert myself into something like that. I was more doing the observational. I'm watching these guys and telling a story about their day. It's not. I mean, I did first person stories once in a while, but they were very occasional kind of things.
Right.
That just struck me. So got to be good friends with Frank. Then, and the very awkward thing about him talking about, I'm pretty sure I've got CTE, and this thing's going to kill me. And, following that whole thing, I know his family a little bit. I know you went to school with one of his daughters. I wasn't that close to him at the end. I don't know that too many people were very close to him at the end because he withdrew. Mm-hmm. So it's a tough situation there, and talked about it. I know there were days that he couldn't come to work because he didn't feel great.
Right.
But I also told him, I think there are days, I think a lot of people had conversations. I think there are days where you don't really want to come to work. That's just a whole messy situation with that thing, and tragic in the end.
Mm-hmm. It is. I want to get to your podcast episode you did with Frank Wachek back, I don't know, maybe 2017. Did that sound about right?
Yeah, probably.
Somewhere around there, where he actually went back to his alma mater, his high school, and was in some form or fashion involved with athletics. Just give us your perspective on that, because to me, as somebody that grew up in the Nashville market, listening to that podcast and knowing Frank Wachek, to me, it was a refreshing thing to hear. For you, what was that like? Because you have a whole different perspective from a writer's perspective.
Well, he went back to Philadelphia to be with his boys that he grew up with, who I think his family's thinking was, this is a great place for him to be. These guys are going to hold him to account's maybe the wrong way to put it, but these guys are going to get him into a daily rhythm. He's going to be surrounded by high school football team and everything, and it'd be really good for him. I had asked him to talk about it maybe when he was leaving or whatever, and it's very hard to get a text chain going with or anything like that. But he actually came to me with that at one point and just kind of said, I'm ready. Let's do a pod. So I think, for whatever he was going through at that time, that was somewhat cathartic for him, or a step that he felt like he needed to take, where he talked about losing the job at the Zone in Nashville, which I think he had come to terms with, losing the job as the color guy on Titans Radio, which he hadn't come to terms with, and talking some of that out. And, I was lucky to be the guy he wanted to talk to about that. And I think, he's very, very, this city, very, very fond of him. So I think everybody being able to hear that stuff from him was great.
For you, when he said, I'm ready to talk about this, how'd that make you feel? To know that you built enough of a rapport with the player, but also built enough for your name in the market. How'd that make you feel when he asked you about that?
Yeah, I mean, it felt good. At that point, I was friends with him, so it felt more like, well, I'm glad that my friend, who knows that this is my livelihood, is choosing to come to my outlet and do this. He knows he knows it's valuable for him to get this stuff out, and he knows it's valuable for me that he's choosing to do it with me,
right? And
that we'll have a good conversation. So.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest memories I've had, just with Frank in the past, was when I was in the 7th or 8th grade, and I think Nashville was expecting a big old snow day, and I'm like, oh man, I want to go in, shadow, see what it's like, what the radio business is like, really. And so my mom gets a text from Frank, goes, hey, you guys might want to come another day. I was like, I'm going in. It's happening. I'm going in. And I was like, all right, we'll let you in. Luckily, my mom had a 4-wheel drive car. And we get there, and Frank's, hey, how you guys doing? Just like we're opening up for a Zany's comedy act. It was just that open, and it was very welcoming and warm feeling. And so I sat down on the right side of Kevin Ingram in their little, I guess, desk, little U-shape. Frank was sitting by the exit door, Mark's in the middle, Kevin, and then myself. And it was just, obviously, you're a kid in a candy store because you're in an environment that you want to be in for your career. And I was like, this is incredible. And thanks to Frank Wachek, because it helped me get a better grasp on the sports industry, radio specifically, and just how people are off the mic. Because, people are, it's firsthand, people are different personas outside of cameras, lights, and also a microphone. And it was just a refreshing thing for me as a kid. I'm like, wow. And the crazy thing out of all this, the constant, Frank was the same person he was on the other side of the microphone.
Well, I think Wake Up Zone was good because of that. All three of those guys were authentic, and I think Midday 180, the three of us were the same guys with the thing on and off. And Jonathan and Chad used to always say, people asked him, is he really like that? Not like I was some outrageous character, but, they'd always say, yeah, he's exactly like that.
Well, and we kind of see it every Wednesday. Is that right? With Robbie and Rexroad. I see you on a regular basis for just about the same amount of time. It's great. I'm be honest with you. It's great seeing you every Wednesday because you bring a different perspective. And it's like you're saying, to your point about writing it, everybody wants to hear the authentic version of how you cover the team. And kind of with saying that, it's a good transition into today's Titans. Talked a little bit, started the episode with Cam Ward. What do you think? You think that is the absolute answer for the Titans going forward?
No, I don't think anybody could say it's the absolute answer. The Titans, I guess you're obligated when you spend the first pick in the draft on a legend or somebody you want to be a franchise quarterback,
right?
To talk that way. I think it's crazy to be, as a Titans fan, that optimistic about anything the Titans do, given their track record. The whole offseason and this timetable from the time they got the first pick in the draft until they take the field on opening day is built to sell hope, but you have to buy it at your own risk. This is still a very bad roster, and he's got a lot of promising qualities about him, but he also has some questionable things about him. They could only draft who they could draft, but, in the context of recent quarterbacks who've come out, he doesn't rank great. Now, those rankings, don't mean much in the end. People don't come out in the order that you expect them to.
Yeah.
He could be terrific, and he could, he could be average, and he could bust. You got to wait now. 2 years to really understand what he is, what he's going to be, how Callahan coaches him, how successful that is, what these people they drafted around him can do, how much better this offensive line will be. Nobody wants to wait.
Right.
That's why people do grades the day after the draft, which is ridiculous. But in terms of like what you thought of him coming out, if you're somebody like in my position, everything gets washed away now. All these guys get clean slates, and you're anxious to see him. Not this rookie camp that's coming up in maybe 2 weeks, where he's. At least he'll be throwing to a couple legitimate guys from the draft class.
It's eye candy.
Yeah, but when he's on the field with the team, start to see some things that mean some things, and there's actual stuff for us to write down, to write about or to talk about. I'm not real big on draft season where you talk about 100 and 150 guys just to see it get winnowed to 9.
Yeah. Prime example, Shedeur Sanders. Everybody talked about him as being one of the top 2 picks, and then eventually drops down into the 5th round and all that saga and so forth. But as for the Titans' sake, do you believe the Titans may have put too many eggs in one basket? Because looking at the draft board, primarily a lot of the picks were offensive players. Minus the safety out of Penn State and
edge rusher,
out of UCLA.
They have holes all over the place, so they're say they're playing to their board, and you've got to give Ward stuff to work with. So they're not good enough at inline tight end. They find an inline tight end at Gunnar Helm, who looks like he should be a good player. But, again, that's because Josh Wiley's not a good enough player, Now, they haven't invested enough in wide receiver high. And, again, so they don't get to it until the 4th round, and they take 2. They look like promising guys, DK and Io Manor. But, you need to see it. I think the fan base is very optimistic. Seemed to me like people were grading the Titans, again, grades for what they're worth, but after Thursday and Friday, when they'd made 3 picks, people weren't very excited. And then Saturday, when they make, however many more picks to get them to 9, 6 more picks, get real excited because that includes a bunch of skill players. Well, 4th, 5th, 6th rounders are not going to transform the team the way a lot of people think. Like if 1.5 of those guys are big hits this year, that's a success. And 1.5 guys are not going to transform the Tennessee Titans in 2025.
Not every draft pick's an Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, everybody has that perspective now after I think it was the whole ESPN 30 for 30 they did on Amon-Ra St. Brown. Everybody's like, oh, yeah, like that could be the guy every time. And everybody that's a fan of whatever team is thinking, that's our Amon-Ra. I'm like, you can't be thinking that way.
Even if they find one of those guys, so that fixes one of their problems, and they came in with 9 problems.
Yeah. Now, as for the defensive side of the ball, obviously you mentioned there are a lot of holes offensively and defensively. But for me, I've had this concern since the defense was just so bad last year. Is Denard Wilson a little bit on the hot seat? I mean, everybody's got to be on their toes a little bit, right?
No, I mean, I think the coaching staff as a whole is on the hot seat. Brian Callahan, I don't know if he should be. I think, they're preaching patience and discipline, all right? If you're going to preach patience and discipline and draft a quarterback, number one, and you've had the coach, involved in that process, if you will, liking that quarterback, telling you what he can do with that quarterback, well, then you got to give him more than 17 games to do it with that quarterback. So unless Brian Callahan's offense is a miserable failure this year, the path is to provide something consistent and familiar for Cam Ward. Now, we were talking on Robbie and Rex wrote about this, like that's not generally what happens. But most of these first-round quarterbacks turn out not to be nearly as good as the pick, right? But if you think this guy's going to be as good as the pick, and he shows you some flashes this year, whatever level or scale or growth curve there is, you got to give him some kind of year-to-year stability to grow on. And if a bad record this year prompts Amy Adams Strunk to make yet another change, which would be the 4th change of a big football person in the organization in 4 years, it's just not going to cut it. Now, some of those people certainly deserve to be fired. You can argue about some others, but this organization needs to put some people in place and have some stability and let some people grow, and constant restarts are not the way to do that.
I mean, obviously this next question is kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but there were some rumors about Jeffrey Simmons potentially being dealt during the draft or before the draft. From my perspective, being a Mississippi State fan, you'd hate to see that happen, but at the same time, if the Titans are not in a playoff position when it comes to the trade deadline, would you look at an option for Jeffrey Simmons to be dealt somewhere else?
Depends on how he's playing and what his value is. So I talked to a couple people around the league. First off, he was never on the market by all accounts. I had a friend with another team, high ranking, tell me he's worth a 2nd or 3rd. I wouldn't have dealt him for a 2nd or 3rd. I might have dealt him for 2 picks, where you replace him with 1 and then you could address another need with 1. But then again, you're counting on batting 100 with those 2 picks. I think Jeff needs leadership help. I don't know that this draft gives him a lot of leadership help on defense. Maybe free agency will. But talking about trade deadline, you just have to see how they're trending, how they're playing, how his health is.
Right.
He hasn't been a very healthy player the last couple years, and if he's not healthy, it makes him not very trade valuable. If he is healthy, you would expect him to be playing well, and if he's playing well, you probably want him around. So I think we're probably premature on moving Jeff.
What is your biggest question going into the 2026 season for the Titans? Or 2025, that is, 2025, 2026.
Yeah, I think it's probably what can Brian Callahan do with upgraded offensive pieces starting with Ward. So how good can Ward be out of the gate, and how can they shape things for him to have maximum success early?
What do you think about the whole number 1 situation? Warren
Hate
Moon.
it.
You hate it?
If it's retired, just leave it alone. I think it's very bold to ask I mean, I don't think it's quite. I don't think it's quite. Abdul Carter asking
Lawrence Taylor for 56, which is even bolder. And I do understand that there's a Tennessee Titans and a Houston Oilers lane here. And I think Cam's conducted himself great and handled everything great. But I think it takes some huge stones to call a Hall of Famer and say, hey, can I wear your number? And I just think people have to get over it. I mean, there's a lot of talk of a lot of other numbers now. I think the Giants hurt everybody. Like, I think the number that's retired that Malik Neighbors got, Ray Flaherty, if I'm not mistaken, was the first number ever retired in pro football. I mean, if that doesn't mean something, and Malik Neighbors is a good player, but he's not, And, what if Cam Ward's phenomenal, you retire it again? If Cam Ward's terrible, you kind of embarrass the number. There's just too many variables there. 7's available. He wore 7 at 2 schools, or in high school and at Incarnate Word. I just don't see the necessity for. Yeah,
I think Warren Moon was very gracious about it, but I think it puts a guy in a very uncomfortable spot to answer that phone call.
Yeah, for me, when I heard the whole press conference and Cam Ward and someone asked him, what's the significance of one? He goes, not a big significance. And to me, I'm just thinking, wait a minute. Like, if there's not a significance, why even ask for the number? To me, it was almost like
that's a good point.
For me, it's almost like, if you're the Titans front office, this guy wore number 1 at Miami. Man, we could really catch some stride with this number 1 thing. We're just going to roll with it. Hey, Warren, you think you'd be all right with us, allowing Cam Ward wear the number 1? What's your number? What's the price tag? To me, that's what I'm thinking if I'm Warren Moon.
Well, front office, it seemed, wasn't even involved, and Warren Moon is fiscally sound.
Right.
I don't think it needed to be a financial thing.
But at the same time,
don't touch it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. But at the same time, like, today's day and age, everything has a price,
There's been some speculation out there that there were financial dealings. I would doubt that to be the case.
So then, what do you think about the whole Houston Oiler Columbia Blues situation? Because maybe Warren Moon said something that may have caused a strike with Titans fans, as in, hopefully I don't see a number 1 in Oiler Blue anymore or something like that.
Well, in the Oiler throwback uniform.
Right.
So apparently they're going to do something uniform-wise that is Oiler similar, which would then eliminate the need to go back to an Oiler throwback. I mean, I think the Oilers' uniforms are beautiful and that they should wear something similar to that. It's a shame for those uniforms to be on the shelf. And I think that the claim around Houston that they have some kind of stake in those uniforms or whatever, you just have to come to terms with it. I mean, everybody's history has left with them when they've moved outside of the Browns, which was a heavily negotiated deal. And Houston didn't make that deal. So tough luck.
So speaking of deals as well, my biggest deal that I have on this podcast is called Meals with Meatball. That's how I wrap up every single podcast. It's a little fun food segment. You know how I am with food. I have my sausage
meat rack. He put his meat rack away. He guaranteed me a meat rack.
I put it away for Paul's sake, just because I didn't want to freak him out.
I was a little concerned. Is it dried meat? Is it refrigerated meat? I just didn't understand it.
It's all the above for the most part. I have 2 lists: Tennessee Tasties, Nashville Nasties. Kind of a catchy little thing. Tennessee Tasties, you give me your top 3 best places you like to eat. You get an honorary one because you've been around the U.S. for everywhere for your career.
Oh, goodness.
Nashville Nasties, you can either give me 3 terrible places you've eaten at, 1 terrible story, or just an absolute...
Oh, you're going to have to walk me through that more slowly. I really like this Thai place that is not far from this secret location that we're broadcasting from. Bluefin.
Yes.
Thai. It's got sushi, but it's got Thai. I'm big on the Thai element there. So one of my favorite spots does not any longer deliver to my home.
They relocate the lines. Is that what it is?
Yeah, and so
full Seinfeld episode.
And
for
we
Paul
don't get up
Kuharsky.
and go very much anymore. So I'll sneak there for lunch occasionally on my way home from some kind of Titans event. So that's one of my favorite places. Edley's Barbecue, I'm addicted to. They sponsor my podcast. I broadcast from there on Thursdays. I think Friday, some weeks when the Titans have something going on a Thursday. And I just can't. It's very hard for me to get out of there without eating lunch. I try to eat like a late breakfast beforehand so as to not be overindulging in Edley's. But
the burn ends with cheesy grits for me.
It's ridiculous. Burn ends are phenomenal. I've been eating this avocado plate, which makes me feel a little healthier. But
I see the glow in your skin, PK.
Yeah,
that's what
right?
it is. Yeah.
And these fried ribs that they have, which it's hit or miss as to whether they have them. So oftentimes, like as I walk in and put down my podcast stuff, as I make eye contact with the bartenders who all know me as they're pouring me my Diet Coke with a lemon, I'll say, fried ribs? And they'll, give me the nod, and it'll make or break my day. I need a third one.
Yeah, third one.
Oh,
it's vital we have 3.
It's vital you have 3.
Fast food's off the board. Can't do that.
And fast food's off the board. There are not enough restaurants in the Cool Springs area where I live and where I go. I'll give you one. Amico's in Nolansville is an Italian place. The penne alla vodka is very good, and the pizza reminds me of New York. It's got like a little bit of a sweet sauce, and it reminds me of the best pizza place on the Upper West Side in New York City, V&T's, which is across the street from St. John Divine near Columbia.
So, Paul, quick tangent real fast. Is it hard to find New York-style pizza in Nashville?
Yeah.
Good New York-style pizza?
Yeah, there are a couple places, but it's hard. You come after a certain amount of time to just concede things, like bagels are not good and pizza is generally not good. This Amico's pizza is very good. And H&R, I think, Bagels, which is in Midtown, is a New York bagel place. I wonder if they bring those bagels from New York. They're so New Yorky. But nothing else compares. And you just like, if you get an Einstein bagel, you just know, like, this is an imitation bagel.
So tell me when to stop.
Faux bagel.
Tell me when to stop for cream cheese.
No, I don't like that much.
Oh.
I like enough that you and it's different too. Is it like full on cream cheese or is it whipped cream cheese? Like I like whipped cream cheese, but you have to go a little thicker on the whipped cream cheese.
All right.
But I just want it to be enough that you're sure it's there. But I don't want a ton. Usually, if you order one with cream cheese, I wind up taking some home.
So enough to coat your enamel on your teeth is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
You?
Yeah, I'll do it. That's fine. I've never had a true New York style cream cheese bagel.
Yeah.
But I'm all about the cream cheese on a bagel.
I could see you in New York doing some eating.
Hey, give me a food tour, PK. It's over. Game over.
I don't know it that well anymore, but I got a couple spots on the Upper West Side.
Okay, I'm all about a good eat. You know me. I put plate right in front of me, I'm going to eat it.
Pound of pasta is a lot of pasta. And
And
I've been known to eat some large portions.
Yeah, pasta, you can't go wrong. For me, angel hair is my favorite. Tagliatelle is up there. It's around number 2 or number 3. But penne pasta, it's underrated. I'd go 2. If you have a nice vodka sauce with it, it's very good.
I'm up there on that.
Yeah. As for your Nashville Nasty, don't think you're escaping without it.
So explain it to me again.
So Nashville Nasty, you could either give us a terrible story you've eaten at an establishment or whatever else outside of the U.S., or you give us 3 places you despise eating at.
Well, I'll do. Hopefully, this will pass.
And you don't have to name the restaurant.
Well, I'll once in a while pass just like a random wings place. Mm-hmm. Like a no-name wings place, a place that's called Wings. And I'll be like, wow, I could really go for some wings. There's one not far from the radio station.
Oh,
I know what
you're talking about.
Go in there. It doesn't smell great. The soda machine,
a little funky.
The ice doesn't work. He has to give you ice from behind the counter, and you get that, and then you get some wings. I don't go for spicy wings at all, just wings. But this is maybe like 11:30. I'm having the wings, so I'll do my Wednesday spot. Finishes at 9. I'll do some writing and some editing and hang out too long or whatever. Leave there not 11:30, starving. Have good intentions of like Jersey Mike's. There's a Jersey Mike in the same strip mall.
Yeah,
love Jersey Mike's. End up at this wings place. I've done this maybe 3 times over the years. It's filled with regret. Like as soon as I take the first bite of the wing, just like, what am I doing in here when I could be, eating my Cancro special at Jersey Mike's.
There you go.
Free shout out, Jersey Mike's. Just atrocious decision making. Will Levis style decision making.
Oh, there's a lot of mayonnaise along with it. Are you
No
a mayonnaise guy on a sub sandwich? No.
No. Yeah, I'll have it on my Jersey Mike's stuff or on a turkey sandwich.
They have that Chipotle mayo is what it is.
I don't know if you need to put Chipotle in there.
Okay, well, they offer it. I was just
It's a
curious.
lot of food talk, Nick. Your people stick with us through all of this food talk?
They do.
They do? Is this
PK,
where it spikes?
This is the meat and potatoes. I'm going to use food reference for the food topic. This is the meat and potatoes topic everybody
the show.
loves. Oh, yeah.
This is-
Everybody loves good sports talk, good music
Good
talk
food
every now and then.
talk.
Food. It's comforting. Everybody loves a good comforting dessert at the end of a episode
I'll
like this.
I'll have to look into that. I mean, I talk about Edley's on my pod, but I'll have to look at maybe expanding the Edley's talk.
Hey, the YouTube numbers, they tell me where people peek and watch.
And this food stuff is getting
It does. It sure
You're
does.
revolutionary,
Well,
Nicholas.
thank you. I appreciate it, PK. Hey, Paul Kuharsky, thanks for hopping on the podcast. You're welcome back anytime. Plug your socials, please. Everybody loves to follow people that are on the
At
podcast.
Paul Kuharsky NFL. Check out paulkuharsky.com.
Okay. There it is. That simple as that. Appreciate everybody tuning in to this episode of the Nick Frazier Podcast. Make sure to tune in a couple other weeks. We'll have some more people on, along with, maybe some country music artists maybe as well, like we've had in the past. Hey, take care. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace.